Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, the Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, has sprung into action today and told us she's going to commission a report into migration from the European Union. Yes, the Migration Advisory Committee have been asked to report. Is she right to commission this report? Or is she simply trying to ignore what you voted for? I wonder, what would you tell this inquiry? What would you tell this report? Don't worry, you're not going to be asked, because they're only going to speak to businesses, and Amber Rudd made that perfectly clear earlier on today. So who are the Migration Advisory Committee? Because some of you may not ever have heard of them before. It's an independent, non-statutory, non-time-limited, non-departmental public body that advises the government on migration issues. Who's on it? Well, somebody there as a representative of the Home Office and 4 academics, professors, doctors, people with departments at universities. They are probably all, in their own way, brilliant. In fact, we might call them experts. If you remember, there was quite a lot of debate in the referendum as to whether we thought experts were the right people. I'm not very happy about this. Why? Well, it's taken 400 days since we voted to leave the European Union for the government to do anything and commission this report. So it's taken way too long. Secondly, it's not going to report. It's not going to finish until the autumn of next year. So the prospects of anything that it says being turned into a policy that would mean we actually had border controls at the end of March 2019 when we Brexit, I would assess as being pretty close to zero. And my other problem with it is that, and as I say, I've no doubt these are all brilliant people, but none of them themselves have ever worked in business, and they'll be taking evidence from a series of business organisations who are already welcoming the establishment of this, a series of organisations who campaign heavily for Remain and will be putting their own vested interests. So don't make no bones about it. Big employers want as much cheap labour as they can possibly get their hands on. And lots of the people that come here from Europe are great and work hard and obey the law and pay their taxes. But I think the reason we voted Brexit is, frankly, there have been simply too many people coming. So I'm keen to get your opinions on this. I mean, perhaps, like me, you think, really, this is just yet another attempt to kick the whole thing into the long grass, to wrap Brexit up in transitional arrangements that effectively mean we're not going to get proper control of our borders for 5, 7, 8, 10 years. And if you feel that way, call me on 0345 6060 973. Perhaps you think the voice of business is imperative and matters more than anything, in which case, of course, you can text me on 84850 or you can tweet me on @LBC, not forgetting the hashtag Farage and LBC. And, of course, you can watch us live from London by going to LBC's Facebook page now. And my first caller of the evening is Charles from Tottenham. Good evening. Is Rudd right to have done this, Charles?
Oh, of course he's right to have done it, Nigel. Yeah. She has to do it. Farage, you've lied to us, in the past.
Oh, gosh. Oh, you're another one. Hello, Charles. Good evening. Have you had a good day?
Yeah, I've had a wonderful day, Nigel.
Great. Right, go on then.
I've had a wonderful day.
I'll sit back. I'll brace myself. I'll wait for this. Come on.
Yeah, of course you'll. Of course you'll wait for this. Nigel, there's nothing wrong with our borders. We can control them. There's no problem. But it isn't half the migration coming over to this country that you think there is. We're doing pretty well. In fact, I think as soon as we scupper Brexit, probably it'd be the best idea.
Do you know, Charles, I couldn't disagree with you more. Actually, the genuine level of migration and population growth is much, much higher than any official statistics that we get every year. And we recently saw a former very senior Home Office official, now retired in 2015, who said he thinks on top of the official numbers, illegal immigration could be running as high as 250,000 people a year on top. So, Charles, I've never made the argument we should completely put up the drawbridge, but I have made the argument that we should be controlling who comes across it.
Well, yeah, so, all right, we should be controlling who comes across it, but the thing is, Nigel, we can do this. I think what's happening is because we're short of border staff, and this is why you're getting the problems that we're getting. If we employ more border staff, and if we got cooperation from, the French and Germans as well to help us out, then I think that way
I tell you what,
we'd be all right.
don't hold your breath on the French and Germans helping us out with this one. At least I wouldn't. Charles, look, there are two problems here. One is illegal immigration, but what Amber Rudd is really talking about here is legal migration into the United Kingdom. But I mean, why have they waited over a year to commission the report? And wouldn't it be better, Charles, and I'm asking you this openly, wouldn't it be better if the government is going to do a report into this, not just to get the voice of business, but to perhaps get some broader views of society as a whole?
That's probably why, Nigel, it's taken all this time to sort it out. Because don't forget, we had all the doom mongers on the other side.
Yep.
We had you lot trying to get us to vote to get out of Europe.
Yep.
And that now the dust has settled. Perhaps now we can start to work out what we really need, how we really need it, and how we can get through it.
Well, I tell you what, Charles, they've waited 400 days to appoint a committee whose members were all in place already. That isn't very impressive. But let me ask you, Charles, let's say you're in charge of this. What would you do?
What I would do, I would complete the study, do it by September, we said, and then we go back to be commissioned in Europe and say, look, OK, frankly, we probably made a mistake. Why don't we sit down and talk about our re-entry? Why don't we sit down?
No, Charles, no. You're going to ruin my weekend. Charles, we voted to leave. We're going, mate. Come on, you've got to wake up and smell the coffee. It's happening. We've got to leave. The only debate, Charles, is the terms on which we do it.
No, Nigel, I think I did vote Brexit, I have to admit.
Right.
I'm sorry I did now. I'm changing my mind.
But Charles, you can't keep, when you have, a lot of people who might have voted for Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn a few weeks ago might have changed their minds. This referendum, Charles, wasn't the best of three, was it?
No, it wasn't the best of three, but at least we had a go. But, the point is, we've been proved wrong, and I think we will be proved wrong.
Well, Charles, we'll wait and see. I thank you for your call. Will in Lewisham.
Hi, Nigel.
Good evening.
Really interesting to hear what you're saying about immigration, but the other thing that we never ever discuss is how this Conservative government have completely and utterly failed on controlling immigration from outside the European Union.
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And who should we put this failure? Whose door should we lay it at?
Well, Theresa May was the Home Secretary for 6 years.
For the entire period. You're absolutely right. Well, and the other thing that fascinates me, and you're dead right, the other thing that fascinates me is the mind of the Conservative voter. So it's 2010, and there's a manifesto that says we're going to reduce immigration to tens of thousands a year. Yippee, let's vote Conservative. Then we get to 2015, and it's running at over 300,000 a year net on the official figures, and the Conservatives say, we're going to reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year. Yippee, let's all vote Tory. And then, Will, they did it again this year. Talk about the triumph of hope over experience.
No, it's astonishing, and, they say it every single time, that what they say and what they do are completely different things.
Yeah.
And it's never, ever discussed. And the other issue about the European Union that I really want to bring up, and I never get to this. No one ever listens to me properly on this.
I had years of that, Will. Don't worry.
Why is it acceptable that when we have an immigration policy, why is it acceptable that if you come from one of the other 27 EU member states, that you get first-class access to this country, but if you're from outside, you're treated like on a second-class system? Shouldn't everybody who comes to this country go through the exact same immigration process?
I think there's no doubt about that. Absolutely. And that is, funny enough, when we do get our own immigration system, and I suspect it's going to be a very long time, but when we do, yes, we will treat people absolutely equally, regardless of what part of the world they come from. And currently, if you come from India or Australia, our system discriminates against you because we have an open door to a whole load of countries in Europe. Will, I thank you very much indeed for your call. Peter in Horsham, was Amber Rudd right, or is she trying? Is she really trying effectively to string out bringing back borders?
Well, no, I think she deals with she's dealing with the sort of reality, because, the manufacturing industry, the integration of supply chains across Europe are incredibly integrated, just-in-time management into the UK. Now, free movement of people is tied to the customs union and being in the single market. So the two are, inextricably linked.
But we're leaving, aren't we, Peter?
Well, what I'm saying is, the form of leaving is what we're talking about. Now, if we go for, the so-called, I know it's not a real term, but hard Brexit, if we leave the customs union,
which is what we voted for, Peter.
Well, some people did. You always quote what people voted for. You don't know.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Peter, that I do know, right? And that is that every single leading person on both the Remain and the Leave camp said that if we vote to leave, we're leaving the single market.
Well, that may be, but what I'm explaining to you is the effects of where you've led us.
Well, but we can't rerun the referendum, Peter, can we?
Well, no. But what I'm explaining is the effects of what you've led us to, because the car industry, the aviation industry, people who build big power plants, I'm talking about big industry in the UK, have incredibly integrated supply chains across Europe. Now, if we move outside the customs union, that will be disrupted. Now, over a period of time, it won't be immediate.
So why are Toyota and BMW, Peter, investing money in new car plant in this country?
Because they have had a discussion with the government and been persuaded that we're going to either remain in a form or have a zero-tariff arrangement.
Well, I tell you what, Peter, if that happens, and you talk about integrated chains and business links, and by the way, there is a big world out there outside of Europe too, which I hope in many ways we're going to become even more interdependent with. But Peter, if the voice of business, in its desire for cheap labour and harmonised standards, wants to overturn the result of Brexit, I promise you, Peter, there will be a democratic kickback, the likes of which we've never seen. Peter, I'm out of time. Genuinely, thank you. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:16. It only took Amber Rudd, our Home Secretary, 400 days to appoint the Migration Advisory Committee, which was in place already, to commission a report on what the future shape of EU migration should be. And who knows? Douglas says to me on Facebook, he says, controlled immigration based on the economic needs of the UK result harmony, uncontrolled immigration result anarchy. Douglas, do you know what? These academics may well produce a brilliant report. They may well make some really sensible recommendations and look at it sector by sector, because this is what the Australians do. The Australian system looks sector by sector at what they need to come in from the outside world to grow those parts of their economy. And I've no doubt one of the things that they will look at are skill shortages. So in a way, if we're short of engineers, we may well need more engineers to come into the country. But don't get confused, folks. I've heard interviews today with business leaders saying, we've got these European workers, don't take them away from us. This is not about the huge numbers of people who are already here working in this country. Their rights are going to be protected. It's not about that. This debate is how we go on from here. And I think that's really, really important. And on Twitter I get, no more delaying tactics. Get us out ASAP and have proper border controls. Amber Rudd is Amber Dud. I don't think she's a dud at all. I think she's actually rather clever and rather effective. And she's a Remainer. I totally agree with treating everyone the same with regards to immigration. If you're good for the country, you're welcome. That was the point we made earlier, that at the moment we discriminate against people from the Commonwealth and other parts of the world. Chris is in South Croydon. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, is Amber Rudd right to have done this, or is it way too late to really make any difference and get our borders back by the time we Brexit?
Oh, Nigel, I smell a sellout coming. I smell a betrayal.
Do you?
I think in the end, Brexit's going to look very, very little different from Remain. And I'll tell you the reason. Nobody's been able to prove that on balance, the mass immigration we've had over the past decade and a half has improved our living standards in the slightest degree. We've got a gross national product that's much bigger.
Yes.
We've got a lot more people wanting a slice of the cake. China has an enormous GDP, but you've got 1 billion people wanting a bit of the cake. and our slices are gradually dwindling away into crumbs. And in addition to that, we've got a housing shortage with the average bloke.
And we've got problems with
half their post-tax income just on keeping a roof over their head. We'll never get rid of that while we've got this immigration rate coming in. And finally, the final point is we're the most creative and inventive nation that's ever set foot or ever lived on this earth. What's wrong with our education system that we can't turn out enough engineers, doctors, and
I know. We've sent people through the higher education system and the secondary system, Chris. We've sent people, I'm afraid, too many people in the wrong direction, where they've got degrees and big debts around their neck, and we have a genuine skill shortage in this country, which is absolutely mad. Well, Chris senses a betrayal, and he's thought it through. Chris, I thank you for your call. You're not alone, Chris, because Trish says to me, Nigel, do you now see the parallel between what's happening here and what happened in Ireland before they were told to vote again? Not just once, Trish, but twice. The Irish rejected the Treaty of Nice about 17 years ago, and they were told, oh, no, that's simply not good enough, you'll have to vote again. And then they rejected the Lisbon Treaty to be forced to vote again. And I took part in both of those referendums on Lisbon. I've never seen such a one-sided, dishonest campaign as Lisbon 2, when the whole apparatus of state and the entirety of media basically bullied the Irish into changing their minds. All I can say to you, Trish, is if they decide, and by the way, the Danes were also forced to vote again on the Maastricht Treaty way back in the early 90s. If we did finish up being asked to vote in a second referendum, I think we're so bloody minded that actually it would of its own nature increase, without even any debate, it would increase the margin for leave, in my opinion. I was just out and about this morning, and there were a group of people sitting outside having a coffee outside a coffee shop, called me over. And yeah, sure, they were Leave voters, but don't underestimate the passion of the Leave voter. You know, people rose up in a revolt against their party leaderships, against the establishment. Millions of them had never voted before in their lives. They thought they'd got somewhere and got something. You take it away from them, they're going to be very angry, in my view. Russ says, Farage, you haven't a clue what people voted for. You speak as if every person voted out. No, Russ, I don't. You know, I do understand that it was 52-48. I think, looking back on it, a year and a bit on, I still find I will still wake up some mornings and say, gosh, did we really win that referendum for the Leave side? Because it's not easy. It's not easy to beat the big state, but we did. And I'm encouraged, Russ, that now the percentage of people who think we should just jolly well get on with Brexit is now about 70%. I think that's a good thing. Kev says, I'm eagerly awaiting for Brexit to destroy the economy. I don't think the Tories will have the guts to do it. Well, 2 or 3 of you tonight are saying that actually they don't think Brexit's going to happen. I think Brexit has to happen. It's just the terms of it that worry me. Robert from Watford, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. How are we?
Well, we're okay, but I don't like, Robert, what I see as this new consensus that has built up. You know, it's built up in the cabinet, and basically, I mean, Michael Gove, who was a very prominent Brexiteer, now seems to be completely relaxed about the numbers coming from Europe and about transitional measures, meaning that we won't take back these border controls, Robert, for a long time. That's what's vexing me.
Well, like I said, I mean, you know, you and me are completely opposite when it comes to these kind of things. But I think the reason that she needs to have done this, although she should have done it before the referendum, is because I know you're saying about business, but we need to know what effect it's going to have on the economy, because that affects everybody. And I think the reason that she's done it now is because before the election, if she'd have brought this up, Theresa May would have simply said Brexit means Brexit. But now, because she is weak, they know that they can start doing this stuff. But I do think it's important that we know what effect it's going to have on the economy.
Well, Robert, I mean, actually, one of the things I welcome about this is that, and although I'm nervous that the people that are giving the evidence will all have a vested interest. But the idea of looking at the economy sector by sector and identifying where we've got things like skill shortages, Robert, actually is a very good thing. Of that, there's no doubt at all. And if, Robert, if from the date of Brexit, we have a work permit system where people come into this country from Europe and the rest of the world because they have something to offer us that we want and we need, I wouldn't have a problem. But, Robert, but that's not what's going to happen, is it? What's going to happen, actually, is free movement is going to continue for many years to come.
But also, I mean, obviously, I know like the immigration figures are going to be a bit skew-with, but half of that might be the reason. If you, like I say, take the fruit pickers, seasonal work, yeah, then they get themselves, when they come over, they get themselves a national insurance number. Now, and then obviously they do their bit of work, they go away.
Yes.
They know they're coming back. They're not going to unregister themselves from that national insurance number, are they?
No, well, that's why the number of national insurance numbers that we issue is vastly higher than the numbers that are actually shown in the net settlement figures, yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, I still think it's important. I said, now we're actually doing this. I think we need to stop dealing in feelings and thoughts. We need to start dealing in proper facts. That's why I think it's later than it should have been.
Yeah.
But it's important that we know the effect it's going to have on the economy, because I don't know the actual fella's name, but he was on the Leave side of an Economist, and he tweeted the other day, again, it may be right, may be wrong, but he tweeted that the economy wouldn't get back to where it is right now after leaving Brexit till 2030. Now, fair enough, that may not be true, but it's definitely going to have an effect. Whether it's 2, 3 years or 10 years.
Well, you know what?
We need to know what's around the corner.
Yeah, you can't predict what the future is going to be, and you couldn't do that whether we voted to remain or whether we voted to leave. I think, Robert, the reason we voted to leave was to take back control of our lives, including our borders. So, Robert, I mean, do you, as somebody who's a Remainer, I mean, do you now accept that the government just needs to do this and do it properly?
I think you need to do it properly, but like I said, we have control over our borders. We choose not to do it. You said yourself 2 or 3 days ago when someone said in Belgium they can, if you haven't covered yourself after 3 to 6 months, they can kick you out. Belgium can do that. Then we can do that, as we're all part of the EU.
Yeah, we can't
stop. We just don't have the money.
We can't. But what we can't do is stop people coming in, because if you've got an EU passport and you flash it past the border guards at Dover, you're in. Robert, thank you. And Robert, you know, saying he thinks actually this report is a good idea, and I'm keen to hear from others who think it's a good idea. I don't think it's wholly a bad idea. Looking at the economy sector by sector, but why it took 400 days and why it's going to report so late, we won't get the legislation in time, that I don't think is very professional. In fact, I don't think this government is very professional. They're far too busy contradicting each other on every subject on a daily basis. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. And well, Amber Rudd has put this committee in place. It's going to report back at the end of next year and tell us what we're going to need in terms of EU migration. And I'm asking you whether actually it's a very good idea to have done this, or whether they're trying effectively to ignore the Brexit result. But breaking news that you will have heard within the space of the last hour: police investigating the Grenfell Tower fire say they have reasonable grounds to suspect corporate manslaughter. Both Kensington and Chelsea Council and the Ken and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation have been told there are grounds for considering charges against them. With me is LBC's political editor, Theo Usherwood. Theo, is this a bolt from the blue, or were you expecting it?
We knew that there was a criminal investigation. We knew that from the outset, as well as trying to identify those who died in the tragic fire on June the 14th. The Met Police were looking to see whether there had been breaches when it came to fire safety regulations, when it came to building regulations, and we know the tower had undergone a major refurbishment in the months and years before the fire. So we knew that that investigation was ongoing. They said that they were going to be interviewing people, that they were going to be looking at documentation. They had received full cooperation. The superintendent in charge had said that they had asked for documents and received them. Now, this is in effect an update. It hasn't come through a statement from the Met Police. It has come through a letter to residents. And I'll just read you the key section of this letter, which has been put out into the public domain. It says, "We have seized a huge amount of material and taken a large number of witness statements. After an initial assessment of that information, the officer leading the investigation has today notified Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea and the Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that each organisation may have committed the offence of corporate manslaughter under the Corporate Manslaughter and Corporate Homicide Act 2007. It goes on to say, this is interesting, In due course, a senior representative of each corporation will be formally interviewed by police in relation to the potential offence. This interview will not take place immediately, since it is important that all relevant facts and information have been gathered before any such interview is concluded. And the letter adds that it should not be taken to mean that other offences or other organisations are not under investigation by the Met Police. The Met Police have themselves released a formal statement.
So nothing's going to happen quickly here, is it?
No, absolutely not. It's a painstaking
Yeah.
investigation. Just to give you an idea of the timescale, the Met Police has come out today that they're going to be putting a wrap around Grenfell Tower next month. And then that is going to allow forensics officers to continue their painstaking search for evidence going forward right until perhaps the end of next year. And then, and only then, if it is the wish of the community, the tower will be demolished.
Right. Theo, thank you very much indeed. Bringing us up to speed with that story. Quite dramatic news in a way that, the police think there are reasonable grounds to suspect corporate manslaughter. But I think, as Theo Usherwood said, nothing, and even the placing of charges against individuals or organisations, nothing here is going to happen quickly at all, which is a bit like Amber Rudd's decision to appoint a committee that was already in place and to take 400 days to do it, to tell us what they think we need in terms of workers coming to this country from the European Union. James is in York. Good evening, James.
Good evening to you, sir. The establishment have absolutely they've got no will to take us fully out of the European Union. It's a complete and utter one piece of a jigsaw of conspiracy. They've gone to a group of people who were the same types of people who were threatening us last May, June.
Mm-hmm.
They must think the majority of the people who voted out are really stupid.
James, they do. Don't worry about that. They really, really do. We are the great unwashed. Absolutely.
We need people running the country who are from private business, who understand how wealth is created. I'd have left. I wouldn't even invoke Article 50. I'd just leave. We could have had a trade deal with Australia. We could have had a trade deal with the USA. We need a will. We need to get out there into the world and give ourselves a chance and, get close to the WTO and have some energy, instead of just being led by bureaucrats who, frankly, they may be very academic, and I'm relatively academic, but I've done better in business. I've worked my way up a company. I've done very well. I'm still in my 20s. It's just so frustrating.
Yeah.
And all they seem to do, and that Theresa May, I don't know if you remember, I rang 10 months ago. I said she had no interest in taking us out of the single market.
I do remember you saying that, yeah. Well,
surrounded by thousands of civil servants, okay, not hundreds, they all remain. It's the London bubble. It's a complete joke. They're in pockets of the big business. And I think you need to come up with something. I don't know what you're going to come up with, but you need to come up with something, because you're our only hope, I'm telling you.
Well, James, thank you so much for putting the entire emphasis on me. And it's lovely, James, to have a call like that, to hear somebody talking about the European Union that makes me feel on the moderate wing of the Eurosceptic movement. James, you made your points absolutely strongly and very, very well indeed. A report on immigration by academics. A what? This will cost millions, and one can only wonder at their conclusion, says Richard from Chelsea. Academics are generally left-wing and pro-immigration, says Steve. That, I think, actually is true, isn't it? There was a report not very long ago about a survey of British university lecturers, doctors, professors, that showed only 7% would publicly say they'd voted Conservative in the general election. So there is a skew, it would seem, a little bit in that direction. The people giving evidence will say they need cheap labour. They're going to lie and exaggerate because without them they'd close. Well, I don't know whether they'd close, but they might just have to pay people a bit more money to work for them. That wouldn't be all bad, would it? At least I wouldn't have thought so. Chris is in Blackheath. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Chief Remainer General.
I remember you from the other... my entertaining caller. Now, Chris, has Amber Rudd got this one right?
Of course she's got it right, Nigel. Nigel, come on. You know, OK, in the 25 years that you've been a Scarlet Pimpernel at your pulpit, telling people to leave the EU, you know there's so much more about the EU that you don't know about than what you do know about.
No, you're right, Chris. It's far more. I learned that myself as an MEP. It's much more corrupt than I thought it was. It's much more authoritarian than I thought it was. It's not a very. The organisation, Chris, is not a nice place.
All right, now let's get back to reality. Let's look at it this way. There's so many things that the government have got to put in place before we leave. Okay, there's things that you don't even know exist, but you preach to people, and then you get them going by saying things like, oh, the government think we're stupid, oh, this is what we voted for, oh, the will of the people. Nigel, you don't know all those millions of people that voted to leave. You don't know the reasons why they voted to leave. You might know some of them, but you don't know all of them. So when Amber Rudd turns around and says, this is what we're going to do, this is what the country needs. You know, and I know that I'm a Remainer and you're a Leaver. Supposedly, in inverted commas, you're a Leaver, I hasten to add. But Nigel...
But Chris, we're not going to rerun the referendum argument, Chris. OK, if she's right... Now, hang on, you listen for a moment. She's doing this. Why has it taken her, Chris? Why has it taken her over a year as Home Secretary to appoint a committee that is already in place?
Nigel, you know the answer to that question.
I don't. I really don't, Chris. Tell me.
Nigel, no one thought we was going to leave. No one, not even you. I remember seeing you on TV on the night of the referendum. You were the ones crying in your pint of beer. I'm about to concede. And that's, do you remember, Nigel? I remind you, just in case you've forgotten. Do you know what, Nigel? On a serious note, honestly, you know this is Brexiters. You know that, don't you? You're not Moses. You know that people are leaving the country and people aren't being, the people from the EU aren't replacing the people that are leaving. You know that rental prices are
Chris, I've looked at the recent population stats, and our population is still exploding. Chris, ultimately, we were on different sides of this. You may think it's right for Amber Rudd to be doing this report. I don't think it's all bad, in a sense that if we do look sector by sector, we might educate ourselves as to what the skills gaps are in this country. But, Chris, let me ask you one quick last question. Do you think that Brexit is actually going to happen?
Do you know what, Nigel? I wish it doesn't. I hope it doesn't. But do you know what? If it does happen, then it's got to happen properly. And I know that's like an oxymoron saying that, but it's got to. Everybody turn around and say, if it was up to me like James, I would just leave. James, put your thinking cap on, man. Seriously, you can't just leave. We've got things that we've got to do. We've got to make sure that we've got people in the right places to run the country. A lot of people that voted leave are going to be dead by the time we leave, or they're going to be on their last leg.
Well, even more reason to crack on. Chris, you've had a good go. Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Elizabeth in Shrewsbury in Shropshire. Elizabeth, good evening to you.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, is Amber Rudd right, or is it all delay?
I think it's the latter. And I said to your researcher that it's interesting that this cost-benefit analysis is now being done, because for years every political colour has told us that migrants have a net contribution to this country in the positive aspect. And yet we now know that they have not done a proper cost-benefit analysis of everything appertaining to people who come to this country.
No, they really haven't, actually. You're absolutely right. And do you know, my predecessor as UKIP leader, Lord Pearson of Rannoch, I think for nearly 20 years in a row, put a question in the House of Lords every year to ask the government, would they conduct a genuine cost-benefit analysis, and it was never, ever done. So, in a way, Elizabeth, this is really quite welcome that we're going to be looking at this, yeah?
Well, it is, but the one thing I would say is that the gentleman before said that many of us that voted to leave will be either on our last legs or having fallen off our perch. Well, I can tell you that a lot of people in our social sphere are now very angry that Brexiteers are still being branded as idiot racists. And I think the time has now come for those of us who voted leave, 17.4 million, who all knew what we were doing, say to the establishment, you lost and we are leaving the European Union.
We perhaps need to stand up, Elizabeth, and say that, don't we? I agree. And it's 17,410,423. Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed for your call. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:45.
060973.
I really hope that Amber Rudd's committee comes up with some very sensible recommendations about what we need in terms of immigration and how we can plug skills gaps in this country. But my confidence in Amber Rudd and Theresa May is pretty low. I mean, here's one for you. The number of illegal immigrants removed from the United Kingdom after being told to leave has fallen by more than a fifth in the last 3 years. We only removed 36,500 non-EU citizens who were here unlawfully, compared to nearly 50,000 3 years ago. And we're told by Home Office experts that illegal immigration could be as high as 250,000 a year. And whether it's dealing with legal immigration or illegal immigration, my feeling is, with the people that are running this country, that frankly their heart is not in it. That's what I think. I wonder what Andy on Anglesey thinks. Andy, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Hi there.
Just before I say my bit, first of all, I was a reluctant leaver. I would have preferred to have voted Remain in a reformed EU, but it's unreformable, so I voted Leave. Okay. I'm now a committed leaver. We've got to go. It's as simple as that.
Right. But is that what the government thinks?
I have my doubts. I'm puzzled as to why people think migration will stop when we leave, coming from the EU. It will still come, but it will come under different terms and conditions.
It's actually worse than that, Andy. It's worse than that. People don't just think that we're literally pulling up the drawbridge into totality, which we're not. But people actually think that people who are here now, working in jobs and obeying the law, are somehow going to be kicked out. And none of that is true. You know, actually, if you really look, Andy, at what we on the Leave side argued for in the referendum, we argued for what about 200 countries in the world have: normality. And normality is a nation chooses who comes to it, what qualifications they have, and in what numbers. It's just the common sense thing to do, Andy, in my view.
Yeah, exactly. At the very worst case scenario for EU migrants is they'll come here under the same terms and conditions as people from America or India or Pakistan.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But is it going to happen with Amber Rudd? Is this committee a good idea? Did it take too long? Or are they just effectively trying to kick the can down the road continually?
No, I think they're trying to, behind the scenes, I think they're trying to either scuttle the whole idea of leaving or only partially leave along the lines of Norway or something like that.
Yes. No, I'm concerned too.
I don't think they have the stomach for it.
No, well, I'm afraid that they are, most of them, remain. They have to after the referendum. You know,
the whole of the cabinet now should be leavers.
Well,
all of it.
It's a long way from that. Andy, I thank you for your call. Lynn says, we need immigration as our birth rate is dropping. We can rerun the referendum. Now we know the lies that you and Boris and Gove and Davis told us. Oh, Lynn, the biggest lie was told to my parents. They were told it was just a common market, not about politics. Don't worry your little heads. Deb says it's the responsibility of every company to train its own workers, not rely on immigrants to fill the posts. Well, it's legally it's not, no, but it would be nice, wouldn't it, if we had a few more people being trained in this country. Ian says it was individuals asked to vote in the referendum, not corporations. Whilst the economy is important, it is only one part of a cog, and there are far more issues than just the economy. I was interviewed by Nick Robinson 2 or 3 years ago when he was BBC's chief political editor, and he said, but look at the GDP figures. Look at the size of the British economy. And I said, yes, but there are some things more important than whether the economy grows or not. It's how people live. It's how comfortable they are living within their communities. I think he was absolutely stunned that anybody in modern politics had said that simply money on its own wasn't the most important thing. I wonder what Louis in Bermondsey thinks. Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Nigel. Yeah, I'm quite shocked, actually, that it's come a year late. And I think, like your last caller said, actually, I've been on hold since he was talking to you. I really think that we're in a position where this is the government trying to go through going through the back door, if you like, for us not leaving. And I'm really concerned. Because I think, with what happened with Labour and Jeremy Corbyn getting all the votes from young people, I think the young, naive people who didn't know, there's me talking, I'm only 28, but I'm really worried that they're going into the back door and that the young people will come out in their tens of thousands or millions and vote Remain.
Well, a lot of that will depend, Louis, on the role of Jeremy Corbyn. Corbyn now is a very important figure in British politics in terms of shaping opinion amongst those young people. And whilst Labour are split on this in just the same way the Tories are, there have, at least from Corbyn, been one or two slightly encouraging things that he's said over the course of the last couple of weeks about not needing uncontrolled mass cheap labour coming into Britain and about us leaving the single market. And I'll tell you something, had Corbyn followed his true instincts, which on this issue have been there for the whole of his political life, had Corbyn campaigned for leave, we'd have won by quite a much bigger margin.
Nigel, can I ask you a question?
Please.
Are you worried at all that we might not leave? Or am I and my friends just worrying over nothing?
Louis, we will leave. The Article 50 process we will go through. We will leave the Treaty of Rome. It would be political suicide for Mrs May, or whoever's going to be replacing her by this October. It'd be suicide for Mrs May, her successor, if there is one, Jeremy Corbyn. Any government that did not carry out the will of the people on this and get us legally to leave would be toast. So we're leaving. The problem, Louis, is on what terms are we leaving? And I fear now, increasingly, that it'll be so wrapped up in transitional arrangements and financial bills that it won't look very different in April 2019 to the way it looked in June 2016. And I think that we did win a great victory against the establishment. The problem is that the people on the other side are still in control. And I suspect, Louis, actually, I'll tell you this, anybody out there who's getting a bit bored with Brexit, I've got bad news for you. It's barely started. We are going to be debating the implications of this and voting on it in elections, I suspect, for the next 10 to 15 years, Louis. So hold faith. We're going to leave, but the terms may not be great. Is that reassuring in any way at all?
Yeah, it's kind of reassuring coming from you. Yeah, definitely. But it's still, Theresa May's screwed anyway, really, when it comes to her, political career. I think
that's a very interesting use of the word, a technical term, and I think you're right, Louis. Thank you. And my last caller is Dave. Dave, good evening.
Hello there. Hello, Nigel.
Hi there.
I'm going to try and compress this as best I can.
Yes.
I voted to leave.
Yes.
On the basis of what you said in the can, and I still go by that.
Yeah.
But I feel slightly ashamed that we probably won it on the back of the sort of like the tattooed oikery that thought you were going to frog march every foreigner out of the country.
Oh, some of the things that were suggested, basically they equated people who wanted to leave with extreme racism and extremism, didn't they?
Well, I went to a local UKIP meeting. It was actually about local issues, actually, but we discussed it. But there were these people there that honestly thought you were going to sort of see to it that every foreigner was frog marched out of the country.
Yeah, no.
They were voting for it, the whole leave thing, on the back of that. Anyway, we're there now.
Well, were they?
We've got to do it.
That would have put off more than it would have attracted, Dave, I can assure you. Dave, are you confident we're going to leave?
And I'm all for that, okay? And I think the effect... this Amber Rudd thing is not new. There's been loads and loads of studies. I think today Radio 4 blagged out loads of stats about the whole thing here. But it just seems another unnecessary trawl through the figures and stats again. The bottom line is the effects of immigration that we've had from Eastern Europe are regional. And when it hurts you, it hurts you. And there's nothing wrong with saying it hurts you.
No, there isn't. And it varies by region, Dave, and it varies by sector of the economy that you're in. It really does. Dave, I thank you. We've run out of time. One last little text that I got here from John. Nigel, the problem is that no one expected the Brexiteers to win, not even the Brexiteers. John, there is some truth in that. There were people there were Brexiteers who genuinely believed that our side was going to win, but there weren't very many, and there were no contingency plans put in place at all. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show on LBC. I've done this non-stop for 7 months. I haven't missed a show, and even the FBI didn't manage to get me off air. So I'm going to be back on the 7th of August from 7 o'clock. Coming up at 10, it's Ian Collins, but up next, it's Clive Bull.
Thank you very much. And at 9, it's the Property Hour. Your questions to property expert and lawyer Russell Conway. Police officers across the country are going to be asked whether they want to routinely carry a firearm in the first survey